Hey, 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 we made it to another Sabbath, everybody.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you too, Dr. Ricks. Not too good to not see a couple other people, but hey, we'll get them later. Kelly couldn't make it, and Gary couldn't make it, but that's okay. We'll run with two tonight. We're going to discuss the Second Amendment. Again, this is a idea to follow through the Ten Commandments was sent to us by Prue, and we appreciate that. So we're going to give it our best shot at helping people understand the Second Commandment tonight. So if you would take us out, Dr. Ricks, I would appreciate it.
Certainly. This story is sent by one of our dear members. A Canadian female liberal wrote a letter to the Canadian government complaining about the treatment of captive insurgent terrorists being held in Afghanistan's National Correctional System facilities. She demanded a response to her letter. She received back the following reply from the Defense Headquarters, and it said, "Dear citizen, thank you for your recent letter expressing your profound concern over treatment of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, terrorists captured by Canadian forces who were subsequently transferred to the Afghan government, and they're currently being held by Afghan officials at the National Correctional System facilities, which you feel are not quite humane and culturally kind enough. Our administration takes these matters seriously, and your opinions were heard loud and clear here in Ottawa. You'll be pleased to learn, thanks to the concerns of citizens like yourself, we're creating a new department here at the Department of National Defense. It's called Liberals Accept Responsibility for Killers, or the acronym LARC. Okay.
It gets better.
More about the program called LARC. In accordance with the guidelines of this new program, we decided on a trial basis to divert the homes of concerned citizens such as yourself around the country under those citizens' personal care. Your personal detainee has been selected and scheduled for transport under heavily guarded armed guards to your residence next Monday. Ali Mohammed Ahmed bin Mahmoud is your detainee. He's to be cared for pursuant to the standards you personally demanded in your letter of complaint. You'll be pleased to know that we will conduct weekly inspections to ensure that your standards of care for Ahmed are commensurate with your recommendations. Ahmed is a sociopath and extremely violent. We hope that your sensitivity to what you described as his attitudinal problem will help him overcome these character flaws. Perhaps you are correct in describing these problems as mere cultural differences. We understand that you plan to offer counseling and homeschooling. However, we strongly recommend you hire some assistant caretakers. Especially, please advise any Jewish friends, neighbors, or relatives, and anyone about your household. He might get extremely agitated or even violent if he sees a Jew or hears the word. But we're sure you can reason with him. He is also an expert at making a wide variety of explosive devices from any common household products. So you must keep them locked up at all times, or you might offend him. Your adopted terrorist is extremely proficient in hand-to-hand combat and can extinguish human life with such simple items as pencils, nail clippers. We advise you that you keep all these items far away from him and don't ask him to demonstrate his skills as you try to get him to adjust to life. And here now is the most important part. Ahmed will not wish to interact with you or your daughters because you're mere women, except sexually. since he views females as a form of property, thereby having no rights, including refusal of his sexual demands. This is particularly sensitive to subject for him. You should know that he has shown violent tendencies around women who fail to comply with the dress code that he will recommend as more appropriate attire. I'm sure you will come to enjoy the anonymity offered by the burqa. You know, should wear that burqa over time. Just remember that this is all part of respecting his cultural and religious beliefs as described in your letter. You take good care of Ahmed, and remember, we will try to have counselors available to help you over any difficulties. Keep us informed. I don't know. Maybe that isn't so much funny as it is.
You know what? I read that. It was he posted that last night on Facebook, and I was rolling when I read it. You know what? It's never going to happen. And allegedly, this is an actual letter from Canada. I don't know if it's true or not, but you know what? It would cure them. It would cure the people, these people that from a distance say what we're doing is wrong by holding on to these people. But it would cure them. It would, you know, what's the term? It would cure them of sucking eggs. You know, you you know what I mean? It'd be curing of complaining because they wouldn't want no part of them. Hey, what do you want me to do with them then? Let them loose on society? Not a good idea because we know what's happening. They're over there joining ISIS and killing people now.
Do you remember when they first said, let's send them to this prison in Illinois? There was even among a vastly Democratic Congress, there was a congressional uprising, and the people of Illinois said, nope. Can you imagine hundreds of those guys in a prison in Illinois? And then their outside buddies, you know, terrorists who travel around the world, could try to spring them out of prison. Just think of the possibilities for that town where the prison is. Right. You're like being in a war zone. Where Cuba is, well, anyway, I'm going to that, where they're isolated on a Caribbean island where nobody can get to except by sea. It's a perfect place. But now they're going to be allowed to roam free, but they're reformed, as the, well, what's that? I call the Valley Girl says. Some people know what I mean. Okay, the big news item, well, these are all very sad news items. But the big news item is, I think it was yesterday, was the 100th anniversary of the first genocide in the 20th century. It was 1.5 million Armenians, and then about 600,000 or 700,000 Assyrians and Greeks were massacred by the Turks. And actually, the word genocide didn't exist then, but because of these things. And what Hitler did, the word has come into an existence. 100th anniversary. It was on Glenn Beck's show. I'd heard about it, but I didn't know all the gruesome details. It's quite, if you want to watch that sort of thing, it's quite mind-boggling. And the Turks deny it. And the president of Germany said today, it was on the internet, he said that Germany feels some culpability because they were Turkey's ally in World War I when all this happened. They say the Turks need to admit it. I think you get over stuff if you confess, but if you don't confess it, aren't you more likely to do it again?
Yeah. Deny it. You can deny it all you want, but it still happened. And yes, I think that gives you license maybe to ignore it and then slip back into it.
Where if you admit you did it, at least I think it's harder to do something like that again. And what I'm thinking is, while that is terrible what happened in 1915, it is certainly, and there's a lot of evidence, even though the Turks deny it. Matter of fact, they were going to make a Hollywood movie about it in the 1920s. The Turkish government put so much pressure on the American government they pressured Hollywood to block the project, which I didn't know that until I saw the program last night. So they've been hard working trying to keep this covered up. But I think three tends to be the charm. I think the world's in for one more bad round of, I don't know if it's warfare, but persecution. And what it appears like, what appears to be going on for the last 2 years is ethnic cleansing in the Middle East. I haven't gotten all the figures, and it's not just ISIS. They may be the more spectacular with their cutting people's heads off. And by the way, the reason they're killing them on the beaches and dumping their bodies in the Mediterranean, they want to mingle their blood with bin Laden, because our president showed that's where we buried him, which probably wasn't too smart thing to do, but I guess it's all water under the carrier now. But others in the Middle East are also. A couple days ago in Baghdad, terrorists through disguises broke into a church in Baghdad, killed 58 people, including a number of children. They put knives to their throat and they said, you have a choice. You can deny Christianity and Jesus, and we presume convert to Islam or die. And they chose to stand faithful. I mean, it's a bad thing, of course, I think they burned the church down after that. And those police over there didn't get to them that quick because they don't care about Christians. I mean, but part of the good part is if someone dies for Christ, they have to have a good reward from God somewhere down the road. So, I mean, that's the positive side, but I think that's what the world is facing. And also, I would not be surprised if the ethnic cleansing didn't include also killing a lot of Jews in the Middle East too. I mean, obviously, we can't say that for sure, but you got the feeling that if the devil has his way, something bad's going to happen over there again.
Yeah,
in the next
worse than what's already happening. Yeah.
So, and if those things go bad, I think the Jews will build a temple.
Yep. Hey, and kind of something that goes along with that we were talking about earlier is WorldNet Daily had an article a couple of days ago. It says Ark of the Covenant cover up. Ark of the Covenant cover up. Evidently, there was a project over there by Muslim authorities on the Temple Mount, and that revealed the existence of some previously undocumented ancient floors. And the designs on these floors are thought to be where the Bible's first and second temples once stood. So they think they found the floors of possibly or flowing from the first and second temple. And this is and also the archaeologists, Israelis, are denied access. They won't let them in there, won't let them near it. A couple of weeks ago, the Israeli news reported that Waqf, the Muslim authority that administers the Temple Mount, had brought a small tractor into the famous gold dome of the Rock. So they brought in a small tractor and dug and removed earth there. So they dug something out. They dug something in the temple, and claiming the project was to replace carpeting. You don't need a tractor to replace carpeting, I wouldn't think. Might be a lot of carpeting, but you still don't need a tractor for it. And they required permission from the supervision of the antiquities authorities, as well as approval from Ministerial Committee on Archaeology, Digs, and Holy Sites was never obtained. So they just did it. And this guy denied doing anything destructive to the site. So it's believed that the Dome of the Rock is, and we know that Dome of the Rock sits over top of the original Holy of Holies. There is speculation that maybe they have found, or, this is all speculation. And the reason I bring it up is because it brings up an interesting possibility. What if the Muslims find the Ark of the Covenant? What if they find it? I think we talked before about Israel finding it, or other countries find it, but what if the Muslims themselves find it right there on site? And Israel's denied access to it.
Something that occurred to me. Why did I'm just saying the devil did it, whether you prove that or not. Why did the devil have them build the Dome of the Rock on that particular part of the mountain, the holy mountain in Zion? Likely because maybe that's where the Ark of the Covenant was buried, or where the Holy of Holies once stood. I'm not saying that's true. We're just speculating. But I can see a certain logic to the devil. He says, it's like I'm putting my stamp on it and covering it up so nobody will see the holy item.
Right.
And that's a thought. So what would the Arabs dare destroy it?
Well, you would think that with ISIS over in the region, the way they're destroying all these artifacts, these ancient artifacts now, it may cause Israel to get nervous and to take the Ark by force, which would mean they would have to go into the Dome of the Rock, which could spark a major war, a battle over. I mean, this is, like we said, we don't know what's sitting over there. Could be absolutely nothing. But if you think this process through, you can see how if the Muslims get it, Israel can't have it, and they're worried about it being destroyed. My guess is they would stop at nothing to get it back. Absolutely nothing, which would probably lay waste to that area, which would also, after that battle, would probably push the Muslims out, and Israel say, you know what, we got the Ark, we got them out, let's just build a temple. You can see that scenario play out in your head.
That's the way I would reason, but I don't know if that's the way their government reasons, because they're so worried about world support. But what if they lost most of their world?
Yeah, if they're losing the world support, then they're on their own and they're isolated. They don't care. They just do what they got to do.
It does make you wonder about the Ark of the. Is it possible that the Arabs could find it? And the Arabs might not do anything to it because who knows? It might even be dangerous to try to open that thing. I know that's from the movie, but if you go back to the original story in Samuel, and the Philistines are probably the Palestinians. When they messed with the Ark, they got all kind of hemorrhoids and a whole lot of bad things happened to them, which aren't fully elucidated so much. And it went from city to city until they sent it back to Israel because they're all afraid of it. And then some Israelites opened it and they were zapped. I just wonder, they might know that story. Sometimes they know things about Judaism and the Bible that might surprise you. They might be afraid to open it or even try to destroy it. I think they would just want to keep it hidden from the Jews.
Possibly.
I don't know. Now I know that ISIS blew up the tomb of Jonah and somebody else recently, some other famous Christian thing that goes back, it's the 3rd or 4th century. I forgot. I saw it. One of the other famous Christian patriarchs. ISIS and they love destroying Christian churches and ancient relics.
Yes, they do. And I think the Muslim Brotherhood was destroying stuff in Egypt for a while until they stopped them.
Yeah. And, even though we're going to talk about the second commandment, about not using artwork and statues to worship God and bow down to it, this might sound like a segue to it, but in a way, I want to make a point. I think also when when Al-Qaeda had charge of Afghanistan, this is back around the year 2000, there were some ancient carvings that went back 3,000 or 4,000 years, and I forgot all the historical details, but they were an invaluable clue to ancient languages and ancient artwork. But they said, well, yeah, but they may have some religious pagan overtone. So they blew them all up. And everybody in the world said, but that stuff is irreplaceable. There's some artwork that I think people don't need to be afraid of. It's simply artwork. We're more likely to worship it than anything else. But what the Bible talks about in the second commandment is using artwork to worship God. And I was going to read Exodus 20, and then Ken, maybe you can tell them what you told me a few minutes ago that I think people will find very interesting. This is Exodus 20, verse 4 through 6. You shall not make for yourselves a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water underneath you. You shall not bow down to them, nor serve them. For I am the Lord, or Jehovah, your God. I'm a jealous God, visiting iniquities of the fathers upon the children, third and fourth generation, to those who hate me. Now, and then he shows great mercies to thousands who love me and keep my commandments. Now, we're going to look at that whole thing, why this is important to God. Would you like to share that comment you made, Ken, earlier as we're getting ready?
Right. The second commandment, obviously, easy to see the part of the commandment where it's not to be, you're not to make any images of false gods. But the other part of that commandment is not to make any images of God, a direct image of, like a lot of religious organizations do, plastic Christs and things like that. One website that I looked at kind of characterized this or described it as, let's say your son comes over, and instead of talking to you, or your daughter comes over, they bring a little toy statue, a meaningless little um, representation of you, and instead of talk to you, ignore you, don't listen to you, just talk to this statue as if they were talking and communicating to you, and it completely ignored you. You would be furious. You'd like say, "Look, you come directly to me. You don't need this silly statue." You'd be angry. You'd smash the statue and holler at them or whatever. But you wouldn't want any part of your children communicating with something other than you as a representation of you. And you could see how our Father would not want us doing the same thing. We don't need that. That is, we can go straight to Christ. We can go straight to God.
Mm-hmm. Remember when Christ was on the stake at probably about 3 or 3:30, he said, "It is finished," and he gave up his life, and he had done the great sacrifice. At that point, God rent the veil from top to bottom in the temple that kept people from even looking into the Holy of Holies. Only the high priest could even see the Ark of the Covenant we were talking about, which represented God's throne seat and the angels that surround him. And nobody even got to see it except him. And your only access was through the high priest. Well, when that veil was rent, it's like God did it from top to bottom. And it's a very thick, very expensive thing. It wouldn't rent that easily. God was showing that the way to go direct to God was open. We didn't need people, priests, and we don't need artwork. And I want to tell the story of the Israelites that makes this point. It's in Exodus 32. In Exodus 32, Moses is still on the mountaintop. He's been there for a long time. I'm assuming because later Moses has 3,000 people executed. I assume there's some troublemakers who are always agitating this kind of thing. So we just assume that the agitators got it going. But they said, look, we don't know if Moses died up in that mountain with all that smoke and fire and, rumbling power going up to see God. He may be gone. And we need a God that we can see, the kind of thing they were used to. So they pressured Aaron. The way it's written, it seemed like Aaron folded like one of those folding chairs rather easily. It may be it wasn't that easy, because there later Aaron kind of says, Moses, you know how these people are. They're always clamoring and pressuring for stuff. And so it may well be that they pressured Aaron quite a bit. But I've wondered, have you wondered about just Aaron was a good speaker, probably had little charisma. Um, doesn't it make you wonder how fast he folded under pressure?
Yeah, they were probably putting a lot of pressure on him and probably making him feel important or something, and really trying to work his ego to get him there, and he probably just fell victim to human nature and just went for it. Figured he, but we don't know exactly what got him, pushed him over the edge, but I can see it happening that way.
And one thing, when you read the story, God says that Moses was meek and humble. And I know when you read Exodus, Moses doesn't come off as weak and humble. But I think it's our idea of what meek and humble compared to what is God's idea of meek and humble. I think Moses was humble and meek in a godly way, but he was strong for God and is a strong leader. They say he was a general in Pharaoh's army. Whether that's true or not, at least I think the agitators sensed they couldn't push Moses, but they could push Aaron.
Right, right.
And so what I tell people is sometimes when you're in a situation where people are trying to press you to do the wrong thing on the Sabbath, don't give them the impression that, well, I'm going to put this in the right word. Give them the impression that don't even talk to me about things that you know I'm not going to do, because I'm not going to do it.
Right, right. That's the attitude that I take. I don't want to talk about on the Sabbath. It's the Sabbath. There is no other option.
Yeah, because once they sense a little weakness, they kind of drill in and start pushing you harder.
You have to have that. You have to have somewhat. You got to be somewhat stubborn. I guess that's the right word, or solid in your beliefs and understanding to stay fast on the Sabbath and the holy days. Yes, you do need that piece of um, character. You need that character aspect.
Be like Moses. Well, anyway, most of you know the story. They pressured Aaron, and Aaron said, well, now he told Moses later he was delaying for time, hoping Moses would show up. But regardless, he said, bring me a bunch of gold earrings. He didn't think they'd be willing to give up their gold, but they were very eager to do it. And anyway, apparently he knew how to do this. They fashioned a gold-plated calf or maybe young bull. Some writers think because bulls were one of the pagan gods of power. Maybe a calf or
I
young bull.
I heard I read that the cow or calf was their chief god, one of their chief gods.
Yes, it was. And as I said, I think it's because they're related to bulls, and bulls are in the pagan world. They're a big deal. As a matter of fact, one of the for those who are interested in it, maybe no one really cares, but I got a material just in case someone did care. The the astrology is based a lot of it on star worship and paganism. I know, and astrology's here, and they have the bull and a calf is a young bull, and it's Taurus, and they tell you things about Taurus. Uh, um, he has great perseverance, stubborn, strong, uh, and he helps people heal. And it says what helps them to heal. Apparently, he inspires them how to love and to keep your Taurus lover. And Taurus is a sign of the earth element because it's associated with the planet Earth. It's perhaps the earthiest of all the signs of the zodiac. And it is sensual and enjoys life in a physical body and sensual. I'm only mentioning that because after he built it, and then, I think his brother stalled for another day, said, well, tomorrow we'll have a festival. Moses still didn't show up. And so they had the festival. God was probably going to see how far they would go. And sure enough, the festival turned into a party that became revelry, and I think got way drunken revelry. It got way out of hand. And the point that I think we need to make is it's it's one thing to say, well, I'm sincere and I'm worshiping God, but as far as God is concerned, it's the manner in which you worship him that's also very important. Even if you say we're sincerely worshiping God, but you choose a manner that's very similar to the pagans. And I think and I'm sure some agitators directed it that way, of course, but also the only thing the Israelites probably knew that well was the paganism of Egypt. And so they worshiped the true God in the same pagan revelry in which they worship pagan gods. And as far as God was concerned, it was just about as bad.
Yeah, I mean they were there for 450 years. That was what they were surrounded with everywhere they went.
And so even if they knew a little bit about the history of the true God, I still think the paganism was deep in them. Um, and it does say, "O Israel, these are the gods, little g, I mean, that brought you out of Egypt." So they attributed this golden molten calf god with being a representation of the God that brought them out of Egypt. But God wasn't happy. And I know people will say, well, and I guess people like this. They do. They like having gold medallions with a picture of a saint on it or God on it or various symbols. And I guess I understand that. But let me ask you, Ken, why do you think people love using artwork to symbolize God, and they think it brings them closer to God?
Well, the best you can figure is gives them something to touch, to hold, to something physical to identify with, rather than something spiritual, which is difficult for many people to be able to associate with God spiritually. It gives them a physical something to look at, touch, or point to, and say, "There's my God," or "There's there's what I worship," or "There, this is a representation." It gives them something to hold on to, physical. And and God, especially in the New Testament, and Christ tells us and teaches us that what we need to hold on to is spiritual, shed ourselves of the physical, and to grab a hold of and to elevate our understanding and belief in God spiritually. The world is still holding on to the physical, and we as Christians need to shed it all and just hold on to the spiritual. It's what counts, it's what matters, it's what's real. Even though the physical seems real, it's why we're told over and over in the Bible that this world and this life is short. Here today, gone tomorrow. What's real is spiritual.
Yeah, worship him in spirit and truth. The funny thing is, the physical world, we know from the laws of entropy, is wearing out, wearing down. Now, granted, it'll take a long time to wear out, except for us. We'll be gone in 20, 30 years for sure. But you get the point. Physical things are really very temporary. Only the spiritual is real. And God wants us to worship him in spirit and in truth. But I know a lot of people will say, well, if I believe I'm worshiping the true God and I'm sincere, how can God not be happy with it? Now, in many cases, God knows they don't know any better. But the point is, they're not really getting close to the true God because they're using things um, that limit God, and and if you read the Ten Commandments, even literally, even without deep spiritual understanding, it says don't make any picture, even if you thought you knew exactly what Christ looks like. By the way, it makes me mad, but that's just me personally. Almost with rare exception, every movie I've ever seen where they picked an actor and dressed him up to be Christ, I thought they're almost always that they make him look ragged, dirty, unkept. He's wearing literally a sackcloth. The last two, it is a sackcloth. His coat was so expensive, the Roman soldiers didn't want to split it up. They gambled over it.
Right, right.
But I believe Christ was neat, orderly, clean, masculine, and well, anyway, maybe exactly how he looked beyond that, maybe Jewish, but with a rugged tan. But the point is, it's not up to me to draw a picture of him. But every time they try to picture God, I know that they get way off track.
Right, right, right. They do. They picture a 60s hippie.
Yeah. And I think it offends me. I bet it offends God. There's enough information in the Bible. They could do better, but they almost never, ever give anybody even reasonably close.
Who
There
did
might
they
be one or
say
two
painted
exceptions.
that? Well, who did they say? Who did they say painted that original portrait? Was that? It wasn't Da Vinci. Who was it?
It was like the 15th century, right?
I thought it went. Yeah, it may have been. I
Michelangelo.
thought it went back. Who did you say?
Michelangelo.
It might be Angela. One of them. One of them. I forget who it was, but they suspect it was a portrait that was somewhat representative of himself, and it was a famous painter that we know today that they claim created that first portrait, who never seen Christ, but these people hang that picture up in their room, all over their house. They put stickers on their cars and statues on their dash. It has nothing more to do with Christ, than a picture of their pet. It has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, and they're more of a limitation and a distraction. Like if you go to 1 Timothy 6:16, um, it says God lives in unapproachable light. Let me just read the verse. Um, and we've mentioned it before, but it's one of those verses that you don't think about a lot, but you realize, wow, this is quite. You just try to imagine what God is like. Um, 1 Timothy 6:16 reads, um, and I'll start in verse 15. Paul writes, which he will manifest in his own time, he who is the blessed and only potentate, the King of kings, Lord of lords, who alone has immortality, dwelling in unapproachable light. Now think about that. Christ lives and God, they live in unapproachable light. In other words, it's so pure energy that if you even got close to it, you'd burn up.
Yep.
And they toy around with dark matter and light matter, which seem to be behind quantum physics and the atom, but they're so nefarious they can't quite nail it down. But it's like whatever the energy behind atomic energy that's locked up in matter, God is behind that, and he's greater than even that. So think of a God as unapproachably bright, that kind of pure energy. One thing that, you go to the book of Job actually was a pretty righteous man. God said so. But what Job lacked was, and I don't think he was self-righteous, at least not that much. I think Job's problem was, he knew he was a good man, and he was, a little bit proud of that, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, as long as it was true. But when he finally saw God at the end of the book, and he saw, I'm sure it was a vision that God gave him, the way it's written. When he saw God in vision, he was so overwhelmed with the vision of the true God compared to, I guess, what he had thought, and compared to himself, that he repented in dust and ashes. God's greatness is so great, I don't think we can even picture it.
No, no, we can't. I mean, you think about all the energy, all the matter, everything that exists, he created. You don't do that unless you have unimaginable and unbelievable power. That plus realms that we can't see that we know exist because we've been shown. I mean, they were shown to people in the Bible. We have no concept of that. He says what he has planned for us and what is out there is far greater than anything our tiny little minds could ever imagine. And something you said earlier brings to mind. You say people think, well, what does it matter if I worship this? It's what I believe God to be. We don't get to choose how we worship God. We're told how. We get to choose whether or not we will.
Because manner of worship is important to God, as the second commandment says. And none of us are artistically, not that God would want us to try, but none of us could even artistically, even with all these new artwork you can do on computers and 3D stuff, we still couldn't do a real picture of what God really looks like. We're not that good. We don't have that kind of insight, knowledge. And God wants us to just use his spirit to worship him in spirit and truth, and not use physical objects which are inadequate. 1 John 3:1-2 says that when we get in the kingdom, we'll be able to see him as he is, because we will be like him. Like, Christ, the big bright light, we're the smaller light, but we'll be able to see him. Moses, when Moses was, Moses said, well, can I see your glory and your greatness? And God told Moses, that was in Exodus 33. He says, well, nobody can look at my face and live, but through special protective things that God did, and just a quick glance of God's backside, and with special protection, Moses came down the mountain glowing, just from that little glimpse of God's back, glowing so much he frightened the Israelites.
Yeah. When you were reading that, something came to mind. I've welded, I weld. I like to weld. I enjoy welding. But if you don't wear that welding mask, if you don't wear that protective shade over your eyes, you'll go blind. You at first you'll get welder's flash, or I forget what it's called, but your eyes get gritty, and you get, it affects your vision. It affects how your eyes feel. It feels like you got sand in them. But if you don't wear that and you try to look at something as tiny as a weld, it'll blind you. Something as great as God, you just can't identify with the power that exists there.
Yeah, and it's great to know that someday we'll be in that family. We just have to hang in there and not let our human nature or the devil's society pull us away. We'll be in that family someday. We'll get to see God's power and understand it, and it'll be quite exciting. But what we can do, we can use revelation instead of our imagination to understand God more. The more we study the Bible, we try to understand God through biblical revelation, then we can worship him in spirit and truth more, with a little more knowledge, more accurately, more meaningfully. And there's one more thing. I'm going to read John 14:9. There are many scriptures about like this, but this is a good one. John 14:9. Philip said to him in verse 8, Lord, show us the Father, and it will be sufficient for us. Verse 9, John 14. Jesus said to him, have I been with you so long, and yet you have not known me, Philip? He who has seen me has seen the Father. So how can you say, show us the Father? So the more we read the Bible and learn about the real Christ, the more we'll learn a lot about God, how he thinks. And remember, Christ is the God of the Old Testament. He told the Jews in John 5:47-60 that he was there with Abraham, and he was the one that told Moses, I am, and he told the Jews that too. So with all that in mind, the more we study the Bible and learn about Christ, we'll also be learning about God the Father as well.
Yep.
And our goal is to try to use biblical revelation to focus on the spiritual side of worship, and not get hung up on statues, photographs, magic coins. And I understand the people, and I thought about this too, when I assume it was an apostate church, or like when worldwide apostatized, an apostate Christian church that Constantine made the official religion of the Roman Empire. When they changed the pagan Romans into Christians, in a way, it wasn't such a big change for them. They still had statues.
Yeah.
Just
It made it smoother.
they used the same holy days, just changed a few names. They still had statues, maybe just change a few names on, and maybe some statues. And there's a little more to it than that. But by the way, also, did you know the biggest split in Christianity's history, Eastern and Western Christianity, was a fight over raised letters and statues and Christian artwork?
Yeah, I think I read, was that in Haley's? I think I might have read that in Haley's or somewhere.
Yeah. Now, one of our teachers, the Big Sandy, said, yeah. And if you think that was the real root cause of the fight, now that's the excuse they use. They fought over artwork. He says the real behind the scenes thing was power, politics. But often that is what the real problem in church splits, isn't it? Human
Yeah,
politics.
it seems to be. It seems to be.
But artwork was one of the things they fought over. Okay, I guess we've covered that subject pretty well, just the two of us, right, Ken?
Yeah, I think we managed to get through it.
I'll
let Kelly and Gary know they missed out.
Yeah. Next week, it's Lazarus and the rich man, Luke 16:19. That actually is a very important parable. Somebody asked me about that a couple weeks ago, some newer person in the church. It's one that people can use to push false doctrine. So I think it would behoove us all to tune in next week and understand it a little better.
Yep.
And we appreciate those who sent jokes in. I didn't tell one of the jokes today because I like that comment about the mark.
That was good. I like that. We need the governments need to do that more often to the people that get on their high horse and think that they know best.
Yeah. They're wearing your hijab. So not to offend me.
Well, yeah, we come to another close of a program. Don't forget the Pentecost is coming up. Land Between the Lakes. If you can make it, we really would like to see you there. It's always great when the brethren get together. You don't know how many times between now and who knows in the next few years how many times we'll be able to do this. So if at all possible, if you can make it, it's well worth it. It happens to also be Memorial Day, so it kind of gives you an extra day to meet and stay, and the prices of the rooms are reasonable. So if you can, like I said, make it. Don't forget. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
At the main lodge where you register, right behind there, we hope to have set up on Friday evening the live podcast. You can see Ken in person live. You can see him, an engineer switch, doing all this stuff live in person at Pentecost. Now remember, gas is cheap, and they have motel range. Anyway, I think the prices are really good for what we've got motel wise, and I guess I could give you maybe the two best values is Days Inn, which is 270-395-7162. That's 270-395-7162. 58 single, 62 double. Telling you with the church. Econo Lodge only $42.50. 270-362-4278. And you can also rent a one-bedroom cottage in the forest. Very nice. We've been there the last 2 years for $107 a night if you get the two-bedroom with one bathroom.
Yep. There you go. It's a great time. Like you said, gas is cheap. If you can make it, now's a good time because you never know. If gas jumps up, you may miss the opportunity if it becomes too pricey for you later down the road, this will be the one you could have made, but and maybe missed. Also, don't forget, I know some new videos were uploaded this week to the ICG Area 4 channel on YouTube. So if you go to YouTube and type in ICG Area 4, you'll find Dr. Ricks, and you'll find John Ringenbach, and you'll find a host of other people that have great sermons. And you can even look for I created a playlist on there for John Ringenbach series on the 10 Commandments, which is well worth watching too. So again, glad everyone made it. Glad Dr. Ricks and I made it through here. Hopefully we'll see David and maybe Gary or Kelly next week. But we got through it. And you know what? May everybody have a great and wonderful Sabbath. Enjoy it. If you can be with brethren tomorrow, that is wonderful. Do that and enjoy their company. So forget about the world out there for a few hours. And hopefully we'll see you again next week. And good night, everybody.
Good night, Ken.
Now, I've been running my mouth and I haven't been looking up the intro. But here it comes. Again.
We're happy you could make it. So glad you are here. And hope that we've been able to make God's word more clear. Until next time, may God be with you in everything you try. But for now, till next week, we have to say goodbye.
Oh yeah, and Dan might even be able to get there, and Dan and Kay, and we may be able to get them to sing for us.
Who?
Yeah.
Who's that?
The one, yeah.
Cost.
Dan and Kate?
Yep. Yeah, they may come. He's the one who did our music for our ending.
Oh!
We're going to have a great piano player at Pentecost, too.
Oh, wonderful. We going to have some good music then, too. So,
yeah.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Have a wonderful Sabbath.
God bless you.